A chilling cry in the Montana wilderness changed everything. When a rancher heard the words, "There! It hurts!" his reaction stunned the entire town. Before we dive into this powerful story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tell us, where are you watching from? Let's get started. The late autumn wind brushed across the golden fields of Montana as Cole Whitman guided his horse along the northern fence line of his ranch. He had made this ride 1,000 times, checking for breaks in the wire, watching for coyotes, and listening to the silence that most people found unsettling. For Cole, the quiet was a companion. The sun hung low, dragging long shadows across the grass, and the sky had started to fade from blue to hints of apricot. The air carried the smell of pine and dust, and his breath came out in light clouds as evening crept closer. He slowed his horse near a rocky incline, where the terrain dropped into a narrow gulch. His father used to warn him that the area was treacherous, especially after a dry season when loose stones rolled underfoot. Cole leaned forward in the saddle, scanning the ridge, expecting nothing more than a stray calf. Then he heard it, faint, thin, and strained. At first, he thought it might be the wind whistling through the cedar branches, but the sound came again, clearer this time. It wasn't an animal. It was human, and it shook something in him. He dismounted quickly, tying the reins to a low branch. The cries were weak, as though whoever made them had already used most of their strength. Cole moved down the slope, boots crunching over gravel, careful not to dislodge rocks that might send him sliding. The light was fading fast, and his eyes adjusted slowly as shadows deepened. Then he spotted movement near a fallen cedar log. Someone lay half-turned on the ground, struggling to prop themselves up. As he got closer, he saw a young woman covered in dirt, her breathing unsteady and pain written across her face. Her hands shook as she tried to shift her weight, but she gasped and stopped. He crouched a few feet away so as not to startle her. "Ma'am, don't move," he said in a calm, measured tone that came naturally to him. "I'm here to help." She looked at him with wide eyes, trying to blink away the fear. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I fell. My ankle. There. It hurts." She paused to catch her breath and clutched her leg more tightly. She looked exhausted and frightened, and her clothes suggested she'd been out there for hours. Cole scanned the area briefly but saw no horse, no pack, nothing to indicate she had company. "Where's your horse?" he asked gently. She swallowed hard. "Ran off Uptown Trail. I tried to find a shortcut to my uncle's ranch. I slipped on the rocks and couldn't get back up." Her tone carried embarrassment beneath the pain. Cole studied the swelling around her ankle and noted how she winced at the slightest movement. Experience told him even a simple twist could turn into a break if handled carelessly, and the fear in her expression only confirmed how serious it felt to her. He came closer, kneeling beside her but keeping his voice low. "Don't try to stand," he said firmly. "If I move you wrong, it'll get worse." The wind rustled the pines overhead and the sky darkened by the minute. She glanced around, eyes full of worry. "It's getting dark. I don't want to be stuck out here overnight." Cole offered a small nod. "You won't be." Without another word, he slipped one arm behind her back and another beneath her knees. She gasped at the sudden lift, but he immediately stilled, not wanting to add to her pain. He looked at her face, making sure she wasn't panicking. "Is this position okay?" She nodded weakly, biting back another groan. Her head rested against his chest as he rose carefully to his feet, balancing his steps so he wouldn't jostle her more than necessary. The path back to his horse was uneven, with loose stones and tangled brush, but he navigated it as though he'd trained for this exact moment. Every move was deliberate, each step steady. He wasn't rattled by the responsibility. He had carried injured calves, injured cowhands, even his father years ago after a fall. At the ridge, his pickup sat parked near a thicket, dust settling around the tires after his earlier rounds. He placed her on the passenger seat with the same care he'd used setting down glass. She adjusted slightly, trying not to cry out. He reached inside the cab and grabbed his flannel jacket from the back bench, then draped it over her shoulders. She shivered more from shock than the cold, but the fabric seemed to calm her. "No one's ever handled me like that," she whispered, half to herself. Cole said nothing, only closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side. Once inside, he turned the key and the engine rumbled to life. The heater clicked on, pushing warm air through the vents. She watched him from the corner of her eye, studying the rugged lines of his face, the quiet focus he wore like a second skin. He drove without hurry but without hesitation. The dirt road wound through pines and open pasture, and the sky continued to darken with streaks of violet and copper fading into night. She shifted slightly and winced, drawing in a sharp breath but didn't complain. Cole noticed every small reaction. He spared a glance her way. "What's your name?" She hesitated briefly before responding. "Hannah Brooks." Her voice had calmed but still trembled. "My uncle owns the Lamar Ranch south of here." Cole nodded, recognizing the name. The Lamars had land that bordered the Whitman property on one side, although their families seldom interacted beyond neighborly distances. The truck bounced lightly over a rut, and Hannah's hand gripped the seat. He slowed a little more, mindful of every jolt. She studied his profile again and wondered why a stranger was showing such patience in silence. The ranch house came into view after another mile, its windows glowing with warm yellow light against the deepening twilight. The wide porch and weathered barn beside it gave the place a quiet strength that matched the man driving. He pulled up near the front door and killed the engine. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he stepped out, walked around, and opened her door. Once again, he lifted her carefully, his arms steady and sure. The night air felt colder now, and she tucked the flannel closer around herself. The scent of hay and distant chimney smoke drifted by. Cole pushed the door open with his boot and stepped inside. The interior carried the charm of lived-in wood, old photographs, and a fireplace still warm from earlier use. His sister Marlene, who had just finished clearing dishes from the kitchen table, turned when she heard footsteps. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, her brother carrying a dirt-covered stranger with an injured ankle. "What in the world happened?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Cole didn't break stride as he answered in his usual even voice. "She's hurt. Ankle. Might be broken." He set Hannah gently on the long leather couch facing the fireplace. She released a shaky breath, grateful to be off the trail. Marlene, a former EMT before returning to help run the ranch, was already kneeling to inspect the injury with practiced care. Cole stepped back but stayed close enough to assist if needed. The crackling warmth of the house contrasted sharply with the cold shadows outside. Hannah glanced around, overwhelmed but relieved. She had not expected rescue, certainly not from a man who seemed stoic enough to ignore strangers. Yet he had carried her without hesitation and treated her pain like it mattered. Marlene examined Hannah's ankle with cautious hands, her brow furrowed in concentration. Years of field work and emergency calls had made her careful but confident. She pressed gently around the swelling, watching every flicker in Hannah's expression. "It's not dislocated," she murmured, "but you're not walking on it tonight. Could be a hairline fracture or a deep sprain." Hannah nodded quietly, relief and worry blending in her gaze. She had planned to reach her uncle's ranch before nightfall, not end up on a stranger's couch. The firelight cast soft shadows across the room as the reality of her situation settled in. Cole stood a few feet away with his arms crossed, leaning against the wall near the entryway. He watched without interrupting, his face unreadable but his attention razor-sharp. He had always been a man of few words, letting his actions speak first. Marlene reached for a folded cloth from the nearby cabinet and wrapped it around the ankle before applying a temporary splint made from wooden slats she kept in a small medical box. Hannah watched her work with quiet gratitude. The pain still throbbed, but the pressure felt controlled now, less chaotic than before. "You'll need ice and elevation," Marlene said, glancing up. "We'll call Doc Morales in the morning. He'll bring the X-ray kit out here if needed." Hannah looked uncertain. "I don't want to impose. My uncle will come get me if I call him." Marlene gave a small smile. "Cole wouldn't have brought you here if he planned to drop you off at the road. You're staying the night, like it or not." Hannah's eyes flicked to Cole, trying to read him. He didn't look away or add anything, but the lack of protest was its own confirmation. Cole went to the kitchen without a word, and returned with a glass of water and a folded quilt that had belonged to their mother. He handed Hannah the glass first, then draped the quilt across her legs. The gesture was unexpected, not because it lacked kindness, but because it came from someone who wore silence like armor. Marlene raised an eyebrow at the sight, mildly amused. "I'll grab some ice packs," she said, standing and heading down the hallway. Hannah shifted slightly on the couch and winced. Cole adjusted the pillow behind her back without being asked. For a moment, the room remained quiet except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the faint crackle of embers. Hannah studied the details around her, the framed photographs of cattle drives, an old leather saddle mounted on one wall, a well-worn bookshelf with history novels and veterinary manuals. The house felt lived in, respected, and steady. She took another sip of water and spoke softly. "Thank you for not leaving me out there." Cole gave a short nod. "Wouldn't be right to walk away." His tone made it clear he saw no need for praise, only necessity and responsibility. Marlene returned with an ice pack wrapped in a towel and placed it gently over the splint. "Try not to move your foot," she advised. "Pain'll spike if you shift wrong." Hannah nodded and let out a slow breath. The warmth of the house and the exhaustion from hours of strain made her eyelids feel heavy. She forced herself to stay alert, not wanting to fall asleep in a stranger's home without understanding their intentions. Cole stepped aside to grab a log from the wood box and placed it in the fireplace, stirring the flames to life with a fire iron. Minutes passed, and the initial tension in Hannah's shoulders eased. She tucked the quilt closer, feeling its softness and weight. Marlene sat in a nearby armchair and crossed her legs, studying her brother with a knowing expression. "I'll make up the guest room," she said after a moment. "She shouldn't sleep on that couch all night." Cole gave another quiet nod, and Marlene stood heading toward the spare bedroom down the hall. Hannah glanced after her, then looked back at Cole. "I can call my uncle," she said softly. "He'll come with his truck." Cole met her gaze evenly. "Storm's coming tonight. Roads'll be slick." Although she wasn't sure if he meant weather or just darkness, the conviction in his tone ended her protest. He motioned toward the hall. "We have a spare room. You'll rest better there." She hesitated, unused to accepting help so freely. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Cole replied without hesitation. "Don't need to know you to help." The simplicity of the statement caught her off guard. Most people she encountered wanted explanations, apologies, or something in return. Cole seemed to operate on a different code, one rooted in quiet duty rather than public courtesy. Marlene reappeared and announced the room was ready. Cole moved forward again, lifting Hannah with the same care he had shown on the ridge. She kept her arms near her chest and tried not to tense. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The guest room was small but tidy, with a handmade quilt on the bed and soft lamplight filling the walls with a gentle glow. Cole set her down on the mattress and adjusted the pillows under her leg to keep it elevated. Hannah watched him, trying to understand why a stranger had shown her more gentleness than many people she'd known for years. He stepped back once she settled and spoke in the same calm tone he had used since finding her. "Hit the wall if you need something." She managed a faint smile. "I will." "Thank you, Cole." He lingered for a second as if considering a response, but simply gave a short nod and stepped out of the doorway. Marlene placed a glass of water and a small lamp on the nightstand. "Rest now. We'll sort everything out in the morning." Hannah pulled the quilt over herself and exhaled slowly. The pain dulled under the ice, and her worries softened in the warmth of the room. Down the hall, Cole paused in the kitchen, staring out the window toward the darkened pastures. A few lights flickered from distant ranch houses across the valley, but silence ruled the land as always. Marlene entered behind him, folding her arms. "You surprised me tonight," she said quietly. Cole didn't look at her. "Saw someone hurt. That's all." Marlene studied him for a moment before walking to the sink. "Maybe, but folks'll talk if word gets around." Cole answered with a calm shrug. Let him talk. For him, the act required no justification. But for the quiet town spread across the valley, his actions would stir more curiosity than he realized. By morning, news would drift along fence lines and through feed stores that Cole Whitman, the man known for silence and solitude, had carried an injured woman out of the wilderness and brought her into his home, and no one would be more surprised than the few who claimed they already understood him.